But I also found when I actually sat down and got right to it, that writer's block stems from a lot of different areas. It's not just that fear of failure. It's actually, mental health issues that can really cause you to be blocked by, anything. And as I started to study it, I realized that there is this thing called the creative brain, and there is this thing called the reptilian brain. And when you are anxious, you rely more on one part of your brain than the other, which is why it can be so hard to be creative. And then there are also those issues of, I got stuck at the beginning, I got stuck in the middle, I got stuck at the end. So I think that there are various ways in which you get writer's block, not because you actually don't have any ideas, but maybe because you didn't plot sufficiently or you didn't plan sufficiently. But I just wanted to show people why they were getting stuck in different areas and in different ways, how they could fix it, and then give examples of that, because it's one thing to take an abstract concept, but it's another thing to show how you can actually implement it.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello and welcome to episode 251 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Cj Anaya. She's a USA Today bestselling and multi-award-winning author who enjoys assisting authors in writing, publishing, and marketing books with her YouTube channel, Author Journey. Cj loves writing, entertaining reads for everyone to enjoy, and dabbles in singing and songwriting for kicks and giggles. And we talk about all of that and more coming up later in this episode. First, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices is a platform that can allow authors the ability to get their audiobooks out into the global market. It is a phenomenal platform that I highly recommend and I highly use to get my books into more than 43 retail and library channels. Now, I typically will pay my narrators directly, and I own the files, and therefore I use Findaway as a distribution platform. But if you don't have a narrator, you can find a narrator one of two ways. You can use their marketplace, where you can find a narrator, which is sort of a DIY service, or you can go ahead and use their more project-managed manual service, where you enter what you're looking for, and they're assigned to you to help find you from their network of thousands of narrators, between 5 and 10 different narrators that may meet your requirements, and of course at different price ranges, so you have a choice. And that's one of the things I love about Findaway Voices is you always have a choice. You can choose your price. You can do price promos through Findaway Voices, and you can choose your narrator. You can choose where you distribute to. You can go all in. You can create coupon codes where you can give away audiobooks to your listeners. I love the choice that you have at Findaway. And if you choose to check out how you can leverage Findaway Voices as an author, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. But oh no, there's a second ad. Oh my goodness, this ad is also sponsored by a really cool book that Julie Strauss and I just released. And this is an ad that originally played on Julie's Best Book Ever podcast, which I highly, highly recommend, as she's getting close to episode number 100. Congratulations, Julie. But this is a fun ad that we slapped together and put on her podcast earlier this week, that week of May 23rd, 2022. So let's just give that little cheeky little ad a listen, shall we? This episode is sponsored by Lover's Moon by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Hello, Julie Strauss, host of Best Book Ever and contemporary romance author.
Hello, Mark Leslie, frequent guest of the show and horror author.
Julie, what do you know about werewolves?
Absolutely nothing, Mark. I'm scared of everything. What do you know about romance novels?
Well, my mom read a ton of romance when I was a kid, and Fabio was always on the cover, so Fabio must be in every romance novel, right?
That's exactly right, yes. Mark, do you know what we should do?
I do, yeah.
Let's say it at the same time, okay?
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Never speak again.
Write a book together.
Yes, what you said. We should write a book together.
I was thinking we could each write about our favorite things.
Yeah, bloody fangs.
And making out.
Occult shops.
Having sex in a bubble bath.
Ancient feuds.
A marriage proposal in Central Park.
A book made of human skin.
And friendly honeybees.
We've really got something here.
You know, I don't see how it could fail.
Lover's Moon by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss is now available everywhere you buy books.
Wait, Mark, what was that thing you said earlier?
Don't worry about it. So there you have the little bit of an ad read. Cute, cheeky little thing. Tell me if you recognize the television program that we liberated that idea from. But that was just a fun sort of ad read, and we're doing a bunch of different things to promote this book. I think I may have talked about it. We're doing a podcast of us reading the book. That's mostly promotional to try to get entice people into checking out the book. I think we may have already had more listens to the podcast than we've had sales of the book. It launched a couple days ago. This is the May 26th when I'm recording this, and Lover's Moon came out on May 24th. But you're not listening to this podcast for me to advertise my fiction titles to you. What I wanted to share, and the reason I shared that, is so you can see some insights into some of the things we're doing for promotions. We got a whole bunch of other promotional things that are coming, including a BookBub new release email that's going to go to 500,000 people, and I'm pretty excited about that. But that's enough about that release. The personal update obviously is going to have a lot to do with my new book release, and I don't really nearly spend enough time on the launch as I should, as I tell other authors to do. But I'm pretty pleased that we have some things in the works for the release, because I'm thinking about the release as the first month or two of the book coming out. So there's plenty of other activities going on, including a book signing I'm doing at Indigo in Cambridge on June 18th. And I have propped up for that one. I normally have Barnaby Bones, my skeleton, who I've ordered a new Barnaby Bones. I did a TikTok video. I'll include a link to that in the show notes of the unboxing of Barnaby, and it's kind of funny how people seem to really enjoy that. That was kind of fun, especially because one of the commenters thought, "Oh my God, I thought he was going to cut himself with a knife," and I said, "Oh, you've seen my work before then." But I was at French River Trading Post when I was in Northern Ontario last week. On the way back, I stopped in, picked up a new T-shirt, have some beautiful wolves on the cover with a moon from the French River Trading Post, and that's sort of it's an iconic landmark in between mid-northern Ontario and southern Ontario, between Toronto and Sudbury. Basically, it was always a place to stop. Hungry Bear restaurant, and seeing the Hungry Bear, which is just like their mascot, and the Blueberry Hound came along later on. But I remember when Alexander was little, he always wanted to stop at the French River Trading Post in the hopes that we would see the Hungry Bear. It was so exciting for him, and as well as for me, because I remember going to see the Hungry Bear when I was a kid. But I picked up a beautiful wolf pup howling that I'm going to be using as a prop. I've got another smaller ceramic wolf. So I'm trying to get more in brand with, Barnaby's there because I'm going to have a bunch of my books from Dundurn, which are the true ghost story books, and because they're traditionally published, they easily have access to them. But they're also going to be carrying the entire series, the first 5 books of my Canadian Werewolf series. They're already listed in Indigo's database through Ingram as, print on demand online, but they're not in the retail system because they're not being carried, but they are picking them up on consignment from me. So I've got sort of those two hats that I'm wearing for that event. And I am ordering some more. I've actually got a t-shirt, Canadian Werewolf t-shirt, which is based on the design that Juan Pedron did for the books, as well as he provided me assets for the title, so I can create a special, sort of an iconic t-shirt image or a little logo. It's even, actually, I made it into a nice square logo for Canadian Werewolf for the series branding. So just some of the things I'm doing, the experimental things that I'm continuing to do as I try to think about focusing on the fact that when, and this is a stat I remember hearing from Dean Wesley Smith not that long ago, is that the average print book is handled by 7 different people. Whereas, when you think about an ebook, it's handled by perhaps 1.2 people on average, because typically it's just one person, but sometimes there's shared accounts, so that kind of stretches the average up. Like the 1.2 children, average children in certain demographics. So when I think about that, I think about and I've been talking to a lot of authors about this lately, is thinking about your book cover like an advertisement for your book. And when somebody reads your book on a Kindle or a Kobo or a Nook or whatever the device is, when you're reading a book on that device, nobody can see what book you're reading. But if somebody's reading a physical book in the wild, on a subway, on a bus, on a train, on a plane, in an automobile, wherever it is, your book is visible, but it's also visible on a bookshelf. It's also visible on a coffee table. It's also something somebody can put in somebody else's hand. So I'm also doing some experiments with getting physical copies out there. And this week I just drop shipped a whole whack of copies of Lover's Moon to some influencers that I know, some reviewers, some people who've reviewed the book before, or not the book. They obviously haven't reviewed other books of mine, just sort of as a, hey, hope you enjoy it. And just trying to get more of those copies out there and doing a little bit of that experimentation. So that's just something I've been thinking about a lot. The last thing I want to mention as part of a personal update is also a huge thank you to my patrons. And I recognize, because of all the personal stuff that's been going on in my life, like where I kind of lost the entire month of April as I was spending most of my days with my mom at the hospital in Sudbury and away from home. And I did not do a patron chat in April. I did not do one in May. So I plan on doing 3. I'm going to see if I can squeeze in a 4th one, but I plan on doing 3 different patron chats in the month of June. And I'm going to do them in the same month, but I'm going to do completely different times so I can hopefully accommodate people from different time zones who are interested in just jumping in and chatting. And instead of, I am going to record them, but I'm going to only use snippets of each, so that in the podcast feed where you get to hear it, it's going to be sort of the best of. So it'll be some highlights from this and highlights from that. But chances are, because chatting with my patrons is so awesome, chances are it's all going to be awesome. So it could be a 3-hour episode. But I want to do that because I feel like I owe you guys some extra, because I feel like I've been slacking. I've been falling down on the job, and I want you to know how much I appreciate you and how much I appreciate you sticking it out, even though I haven't been able to fulfill that for the past couple months. Because again, it's the 26th of May. I don't think I'm going to be able to get a roundtable in by the end of the month, and I want to give some notice. I want people to have an opportunity to know about it more than just a couple days in advance, because people don't often check their emails and I know a lot of listeners binge listen to the podcast, because I've had quite a few of you wonderful listeners reach out to me and say, "Oh my God, I just binge listened to the last 2 months. I'm so sorry. I just heard about your mother," etc. So I understand that, because I do the same thing with other podcasts. But okay, I'm getting to the 14-minute mark, and I'm babbling as I often do. So rather than babble, what I want to do is I want to take you right into this interview with Cj Anaya. And we connected at Superstars Writing Seminars in February. We had lunch together with a bunch of people. I just, the stuff she was saying was just like brilliant. And I was like, I gotta have you on my podcast. I want people to hear you, because I'm inspired by you, and I know other people will be. And I think we shared an Uber to the dinner event that was sort of off campus, off site, and got a chance to chat and get to know each other a little bit more. And I just thought she was amazing. And after the interview, I went and listened to some of the music. She's going to talk about some of the music she does. I went to Reverb Nation and listened to a bunch of her songs, and oh my God, the woman is talented, extremely talented. So if you stick around after the end credits, you're going to hear a snippet of one of her awesome songs, which I went and purchased because, again, I want to support my guests. So I purchased that off Reverb Nation, so that, sharing it here, at least I've given her some money for that, and I know it is a treat you're going to enjoy, and you're going to enjoy the treat of the conversation that CJ and I have, and that's coming up right after this sounder. CJ, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to finally get you on the podcast, because it was in February of 2022 that I think we were having lunch at Superstars Writing Seminars. And as you were talking about your fiction, as you were talking about your origin story, I thought, this is so cool. We need to get you on. We need to get you on the podcast so I can share you with my listeners. So thanks for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, why don't we start with your superhero origin story? So you weren't always a writer. You were a different kind of creative. Let's and how, first, before you get into the writing aspect, singing, songwriting, what led to that? What was that path that brought you into that world?
I did a lot of performing growing up, and I was singing. This is all my parents, by the way. Obviously, I don't remember this, but my parents said that by the time I was 18 months old, I was singing and in full sentences. And the first song I ever performed was "Let's Hear It for the Boys," and I was a year and a half old.
Do we have video of that maybe I can include?
Unfortunately, no. I know.
Are you sure?
That'd be great.
If I can get a hold of the family, maybe I can get a hold of something.
And my mother would be more than happy to hand any and all of that over, because the family, we're huge oversharers in that respect. Yeah, she'd be down.
Let's give the girl a hand. Sorry, I got the earworm stuck in my head now.
Well, funnily enough, I actually sang that at a competition and I got third place for it. So that was exciting too. I came full circle when I was 19, but it was just something that I loved to do. And I did a lot of different performing throughout high school. In college, I was the vocalist of their college jazz band. And so we would go around and sing in a lot of different places. I went to Sacramento State University for their vocal jazz program. I got sick, so I couldn't continue to do all of that. But I started writing songs probably when I was about 18. And then
wrote songs as well. Okay.
Yeah. I entered a contest when I was 18. They loved the song. And so they got me a producer and we started going that route. But this is not to get anybody feeling bad for me. I just had a couple bouts of cancer at different times in my life where when things started to progress with the singing aspect, I get sick and it just, derailed everything. And that happened when I was 18. And then that happened again when I was, 26. So it just,
twice that young, like before you were 30.
Yeah. So I've had cancer a total of 3 times. I just recently beat it last year in September. So I know. Awesome. I know. And anytime anyone's like, "Oh, you poor thing," I'm like, "Nah, I didn't even have to do the chemo. I just did all the, herbs stuff and I'm good to go." So a lot of times I don't feel like I fought the same battle that a lot of people who do have to do chemo have fought. Mostly I'm just like, "Nah, I was good." Don't worry about it. But It does derail things,
That attitude though, I mean, that is a winning attitude. Wow.
Well, it's necessary, especially if you run into scenarios where things just don't fall into place like you want them to. And I think that happens to everybody. And I think if you talk to any creative out there, you're going to find that in the process of creating something and finding momentum and getting somewhere, the obstacles are enormous, which is great fodder for any book. If you really want to, if you're going to write what then you can always lean back on your own life and any challenges that you've encountered, because everybody loves it when you beat your characters up. And so, you can really channel that. But I went from writing songs and then finally realizing that was probably not going to take me anywhere, because I kind of lost that momentum and started a family. to just signing the CDs that I did have at a bookstore. And that's where I ran into Jennifer Griffith, who she'll just always be my fabulous muse. She writes romantic comedy. And I realized when I was at the bookstore standing next to her, I was looking at these books that she was selling. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've read all of her books in high school. And I didn't know, I'd never met her. So I was so excited. And I introduced myself and did the fangirl thing that I'm sure authors just are like, oh, especially if you're an introverted author, you're like, too much energy coming from this person. So I was, of course, latched onto her, and she invited me to join her writing group. And that's where my journey began. And her words on selling this, by the way, were, if you can write a song, you can write a novel. It's the exact same thing. Because I was telling her, no, I can't do that. No, for the record. It's not the exact same thing.
Well, I mean, no, you imagine something, you visualize something, it goes through your imagination, and then you create it in a way that other people can enjoy it. That's the same thing.
Go. Yeah, it's the same thing. Absolutely. I always tease her about that. She said, I had to hook you somehow. You were doubting yourself way too much.
Wow. Before we get into the stuff that you started to write, because I want to know what you started to write, but what style, what genre of music were you writing and performing?
So I did a couple of Christian songs. So I was in the Christian industry for some of that music. And then I did a lot of jazzy stuff, mainstream stuff. I even did kind of alternative rock stuff. So there were a lot of different, I like a lot of different music. So I did a lot of different things. Just whatever hit me, I would do.
So what was the first thing you wrote that was not a song lyric or music? What was the first thing that you wrote that was prose?
Oh, that was prose. Oh, well, we're going to have to go all the way back to when I was like 10. I would write short stories for friends for Christmas presents because I wanted to give all of my friends Christmas presents. Huh?
That is so lovely.
Thank you. Well, mainly it was just because I really wanted to give them my stuff and say, what do you think? It was all vain. But I would still give it to them for the Christmas present aspect anyway. I'm like, here you go. Here's a Christmas present. Now tell me what you think.
Tell me I'm awesome.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. So that's where it started. But as far as starting to write songs, the first song I ever wrote was all about heartbreak and angst and, the first breakup. Yeah, imagine that.
You were a teenager, of course.
Of course. And I still look back on it and it's like, it wasn't half bad. It wasn't half bad, but
is there a place we have access to this music, or is it like that video of you singing? Yes. It was a Denise Williams song, right?
Yeah. Actually you can go to, I have all of my stuff up on Reverb Nation. That's where a lot of musical artists go is Reverb Nation.
So you'll send me links, please, so I can share that with in the show notes. Awesome.
Absolutely. And then of course, if you ever YouTube like Cj Anaya or Cindy Savage, or because that was my maiden name before I got married, you can probably find some YouTube videos of me performing at different things. But that's if you're really bored and you feel like you have the time and you want to go look for
I sometimes treat my listeners with a post end credit clip of music that's related to something we talked about. Would I be able to clip something appropriate for the end of it?
Yeah.
There you go, listeners.
Knock yourself out.
Okay.
If you want to.
But so you're writing your fiction. What was the first thing that you wrote after Jennifer inspired you to get back to that?
I wrote The Healer, which ended up being the first book in a 4-book series. And because of cancer and because of all of the ways in which I was trying to handle things naturally, I was a firm believer and still am in energy healing. And so what I did is I took that character, and it started off with a dream. I think a lot of authors are inspired by dreams. But I had a dream about a spirit trapped in a Japanese statue. It was so bizarre. And I just thought, okay, where do we take this? And eventually The Healer was born. And Hope is a 17-year-old girl who is also a reincarnated Japanese princess. I know. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. But she's able to connect to an individual's life force and teach it how to heal itself, essentially. But, with great power comes great responsibility, and you can't abuse things like that. So if someone's meant to die, there's really not much she can do. And she has to, deal with that and come to that realization. But she's also capable of kind of going against the laws of nature. And what are the consequences there? How does that play out? So it's a young adult romantic fantasy story. So there is love within it. There is a love triangle. Don't shoot me for the cliche. And so it was something that I wanted teenagers to consider when it comes to choices and accountability and what the consequences are that follow, and fate versus that actual choice. Can you determine your own fate, or is it actually dictated for you? So it was a really fun series to write, and for the most part, I think folks like it when they read it, especially if they're the target audience for it. So that was a fun one.
Are the rest of your sort of fantasy novels, are they aimed at the YA market?
Yeah, anything that I write under Cj Anaya is aimed at the YA market. Yeah. So the other series, Paranormal Misfits, that is also for teenagers. And I was touching on, it actually started out with a short story. So My Fair Assassin was a 10,000 word short story that I put in an anthology called Strange and Lovely. And I just joined with a bunch of other people, and I wrote it because it was just supposed to be a fun snippet of, this girl who thinks she's human, grows up human, but she's actually a fairy princess. I'm always back to the princesses. Again, cliche, but this is what I love. So we have Krista being visited by an assassin who also ends up being her fated mate. And in that 10,000 word snippet, I really focused on appearance, and I focused on looks, and I focused on the way in which she had changed herself to fit other people's expectations and ideas, because as someone who is not human, she looks different.
Right.
And so I was focusing on that because I had nieces and family members and children who feel so very uncomfortable in their own skin.
Yeah.
And I just want them to celebrate themselves. And I wanted to illustrate that in a story. And I figured the best way to get those messages across is to do it in a fun story rather than sounding like you're nagging, because I'm a good nag. I excel.
Of course.
I'm
the nagging and yeah.
Oh, man, I'm so good at it. So stories are better. It illustrates points really well. And then people liked it so much that they wanted a full book. So I wrote a full book. And then they were like, nope, there's something else here. You can take it somewhere. And I was like, all right. So I did. And now it's 6 books.
So the Paranormal Misfit series, are there different aspects of that, the things that cause teenagers angst and stress and questioning themselves, etc.? What are some of the other issues that you've sort of addressed in that series? I
address sexual abuse because that's something that Krista faces. She was in the foster system for a while, and I feel like it's not something that people think they can talk about. So I talk about it in there, not like explicitly, because this is YA and I'm trying to make it really appropriate, but at the same time, it's taking on harder subjects that people need to read about and understand. And I don't want teenagers to feel like they're alone in these experiences. Another thing I tackle is when they actually go to the Fae realm, there is this very distinct class when it comes to hierarchy. There are lesser Fae. There are Fae who are more important, so to speak. And Krista does not see class. She doesn't see social boundaries or any of those, she doesn't see hierarchy and structure in that way. She just sees people. She just likes people. And she is able to unify this realm against a really severe, awful, horrible threat because she sees people and doesn't, recognize prejudices. She doesn't recognize what I would term racism, So I was discussing all of these things that I thought were really relevant several years back, but I feel are also very applicable now because of all the different things we're dealing with. So to me, Krista and her strength and the way that she just sees people rather than races or species of individuals, it was just all about love and kindness for her. And I thought that was another thing that needed to go in the book. So, yeah.
Wow. So, Fated Mates was the first series, right? The 4-book series.
Mm-hmm. The healer. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, the healer series, and then you have the I love Paranormal Misfits because we all, especially in our teenage years, all feel like misfits.
Yeah.
And then you have Allies of the Fae realm, which
Yeah,
is that title?
basically it's a subtitle of that. And here's where you don't do what I do. Like you actually need to do some market research before you write. Whereas I just wrote stuff when I started out. I didn't do the market research. And so the way that I titled things, I was like, wow, nobody is really going to know what this is about. So in my subtitle, I was like, Allies of the Fae realm, boom. And I was only able to do that with the ebook. Obviously, you can't change stuff on the paperback side of things, but I was like, I really should clarify a few things here and get in some keywords. That's a good idea. So yeah.
Well, I mean, it seems to have worked out. I was looking at book 6 and you have like on Amazon alone over 100 reviews. So
yes, yeah,
I think you've done okay with it.
I've managed. I have managed in that one. Yeah. And I'm excited that people liked it. And that last book, man, it took like 2 years to write because of the pandemic and all sorts of stuff, but they were patient. My fans were patient. And once I got it, I think my fear was, oh, I can't let them down. They've waited 2 years for this. What if this really sucks? And they liked it. So I was excited about that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, so the writing during the pandemic, now I know you have a book on writer's block. Was that one of the challenges that you faced?
Oh yeah. I have horrible anxiety, horrible imposter syndrome. And then, I will deal with depression. Okay. I call it seasonal depression.
Right.
I'm actually not sure what it is. I'm not a doctor, but I deal with all sorts of things that will cause me to clean my house rather than write.
Okay. Procrastination syndrome, I call it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I will do everything in my power to not write, even though I want to so desperately. So it's a very weird internal conflict. It's a very weird issue that I struggle with. But I also found when I actually sat down and got right to it, that writer's block stems from a lot of different areas. It's not just that fear of failure. It's actually, mental health issues that can really cause you to be blocked by anything. And as I started to study it, I realized that there is this thing called the creative brain, and there is this thing called the reptilian brain. And when you are anxious, you rely more on one part of your brain than the other, which is why it can be so hard to be creative. And then there are also those issues of, oh, I got stuck at the beginning, I got stuck in the middle, I got stuck at the end. So I think that there are various ways in which you get writer's block, not because you actually don't have any ideas, but maybe because you didn't plot sufficiently or you didn't plan sufficiently. So for those plotters and planners who really work well with outlines, I wrote that short book, which really is pretty general. And then I started to create a course, which incidentally, I'm almost done finishing. So that's, okay. Yeah, I know. I've just got a couple more videos to put in there, but I just wanted to show people why they were getting stuck in different areas and in different ways, how they could fix it, and then give examples of that, because it's one thing to take an abstract concept, but it's another thing to show how you can actually implement it. So that's what I did there.
So you've got some videos to also help writer's block and other issues that they may face? Yep,
correct.
So you'll send us links to where we can find some of them?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And then there's a course. So you also do developmental editing. You also do line editing.
Right.
Is that, do you specialize in YA, paranormal, romance?
I do. Yeah. I'm real good in a lot of different romance subgenres. If you ask me to edit something in sci-fi, I will be hopelessly lost. I could possibly do a copy edit or a proofread, but I'm not going to know like technical terms or terminology or even understand the tropes of that, that genre. Yeah. But I can do fantasy. I can do romance. And I love mysteries. So I'm your girl for mystery. Absolutely. Because that's what I grew up reading initially. I was all about Nancy Drew. And then I went on to Dean Koontz and other thriller stuff. Yeah.
Nancy Drew and Dean Koontz.
Seriously, isn't that a funny jump? But yeah.
Was Lightning your first Dean Koontz? Because that was a very much of a romance.
Oh, no. The first Dean Koontz was it The Husband? The Husband.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. That was, and I read that and I was like, oh, I must read all of his books immediately. So I read his Frankenstein series as well, which I didn't know that Kevin had co-written some of that. I had no idea. Right. So I know when I found that out, I was like, oh, mind blown. I was so excited. Yeah. It was great.
Small world indeed, isn't it?
I know. It does become that as you, and then you start hanging out with all these authors that you've just idolized and you realize, dang, they're so nice. How nice to be so nice to people that you don't know that keep following you around at conferences and won't leave you alone, So,
How was Superstars for you
it
back in
was great.
February? Was that
Yeah,
like one of the first conferences you'd gone to since the pandemic started?
it was. Yeah, because the one I went to before that was the 20 books to 50K, which incidentally was where I had met Kevin and joined his master's program from there. So I hadn't been to anything since then. And usually I go with Jen Griffith. She's my partner in arms on that one, but I went alone for the first time and I was really nervous about going alone.
So
But
are you an introvert? Was that a challenge going alone?
a little bit. I grew up an extrovert. I just find that the older I get, I think I'm just tired.
Right.
you just get to a point where you're like, okay, I want to hang out with people, but I also know there's a nice warm bed upstairs. What do I do? And so, you get to that point where also you're a mom and you're tired. Oh, you're just tired. But I had so much fun and it wasn't hard at all to make friends. It wasn't hard to talk to people because you find that probably you're dealing with a lot of different introverts there. I don't find a lot of extroverts in the writing world, not too often anyway. They're very rare. But for those that you do approach and talk to, that even if they are annoyed with you because you won't leave them alone, at least they're nice about it. So
That's true. And I think we first connected, I think there were 8 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of crammed as many chairs as we could.
Right around the table.
Table. Probably most of us introverts, but we still managed to enjoy ourselves and not all freak out and want to run back to our rooms.
Exactly.
Awesome. So when you think about your writer journey and all the different things you've written, the stuff you've done to help writers, if you were to go back to when you first, Jennifer gave you the advice and maybe you were doubting whether or not you could do it, what's some advice you would want to tell the younger CJ?
I would want to tell the younger CJ that, of course, you're not going to be a good writer. Of course, it's not going to be good. You're just starting and you're just learning. And to not be terrified of constructive criticism, which I was absolutely terrified because it was very difficult for me to figure out how to not take that personally, because writing was an identity for me on a lot of levels. And so what I soon found when I was going to those writing groups and I was getting those critiques every month was that it was always handled in a kind way, but it was always so instructional. And those basic fundamentals were so key and so necessary. And when I would learn something new, it was like I was thirsting for more. So eventually it got to a point where I wanted people to look at it. And yes, I want to know what's good, but I really wanted to know what could be better, And so it wasn't necessarily what's wrong with it. It was what can we improve upon here? And that was the way that I was finally able to wrap my brain around constructive criticism and not take it personally. How can we improve? How do we make this better? And so by looking at it that way, it took a lot of pressure off me because I didn't have to be perfect right away. I didn't have to be the best writer. And to this day, I am still not the best writer and I will still keep learning. And I think that's another thing that I would want any writer who's starting to understand. It's okay to not be good yet. You'll get better if you keep writing. So
okay. I love that. I'm going to take you to the next little thing. Now, you said you've done that Masters in Publishing program with Kevin J. Anderson via the virtual university and the 1 week in person.
Yes, it's so fun. I love it.
What's one of the things that sort of surprised you when you took that? Because you'd already been in the business, you already understood the creativity, you already understood because you were talking about, I learned this about marketing. So is there something in the course that you went, wow, I had not expected that?
Yeah, I had not expected hybrid authors. I thought that you were either indie or you were traditional. Right. I didn't know that you could do like a mishmash of both. And so it's been really an interesting education to see the variety, the different things that you can do with different formats, with different actual intellectual property, and to see the different things that Kevin has done with his intellectual property has been a real eye-opener. And then, of course, the way that he navigates that. So I have found that to be a really stellar education for me because it opens up so many possibilities when it comes to how I can distribute and where I can distribute and the different projects that I could take on. So while I do know quite a few things that he teaches already, simply because I had to learn it through the school of hard knocks rather than actually going to an established program.
Right.
There were so many gaps in my knowledge that needed to be filled. And that's exactly what this program has done, not to mention the benefits of just knowing people and connecting with people and making some really fabulous friends along the way. So it's been great. I've loved it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So now that you do fiction, now that you write long prose, is there any part of you that wants to play with, like, sometimes does an idea come that's not a story, but maybe this is more of a song, and what do you do when that happens?
I just write the song, and usually it's for my characters, which is funny because, and I've done that. I've written about 2 or 3 songs for different characters in my books.
Really?
And I've never produced them, but it's all just stuck in my head. And then, just a line of verse. And I will, every now and then I will do that. I find that because my creativity is spread in different ways and my focus is spread in different ways, that doesn't come to me as often as it used to. But when it does, I pay attention.
This sounds like little Easter eggs or little nuggets for your diehard fans who really want more of a character. You're like, well, here's the song I wrote for her.
Right. Well, for anyone who loves Hope and Ty and their story in The Healer, I definitely have a song for them. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. CJ, thank you so much for hanging out with me and putting up with my questions.
I love them. I love the questions.
Where can my listeners find out more about you, your editing services, the courses, etc., all the cool stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, well, obviously you can find my books on Amazon, and I'm working on going wide, I guess you could say. So for now, the ebooks are on Amazon. The physical copies I'm putting everywhere else. You can find me on YouTube as well for instructional stuff through Author Journey. That's what my YouTube channel is called. Okay. And you can find me on Facebook, all those social media sites. And then if you ever just want to email me and ask me some questions, it's email at authorcjanaya.com. That's a really easy way to get a hold of me. And then I do freelance work on Upwork. So that's where a lot of folks find me. And I think my passion when it comes to working on Upwork isn't just the developmental editing, but really writing coaching as well. I just like to help authors improve their writing. It's what I love to do. So
awesome. And it sounds like your website address would be authorcjanaya.com.
Yep. Author CJ. Yeah. authorcjanaya.com. Yes.
authorcjanaya.com. Awesome. CJ, thanks again for hanging out with me today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Mark. This has been fun.
So in the conversation, CJ talked about learning to deal with constructive criticism and appreciating that it's not that there's anything wrong with the work, but about what can we improve upon and how can we make this even better. I love that attitude. That's one of many echoes of positive attitude that you heard throughout the interview. I mean, as she mentions being a cancer survivor 3 times, and she just kind of says it matter-of-factly and doesn't soak in it, and she's basically got such a great attitude about how lucky she is, and that permeates throughout all of the things that she talked about. The appreciation she has with her music, the appreciation she has in the writing she's done, in the people she works with, meeting Jennifer and the influence that has had on her, the interactions with her fans and how patient they were with her. And I love that positive attitude, that sort of, let's just get at this, let's see what we can do. And it comes back to how we deal with things that happen to us in terms of, I've put my work in from my editor, or this is feedback I may get from readers. And I know, and I'm inspired by CJ and thinking that, okay, so if I get a bad review, or if something happens and somebody's not enjoying my writing, maybe it's not for them, but maybe there's something I can learn from that. Maybe there's something I can learn about how I can make my work better. I don't have to take it personally. I can appreciate the criticism in a constructive way, and I can look at how can I leverage this? How can I use this experience to make that thing better? And that's the kind of thing that we do as writers to become better writers. I honestly suspect she takes such passion in helping other writers, and it shows through if you watch any of the YouTube videos. And of course, there's going to be links to the author journey. If you just go to youtube.com, basically, and put in author journey, you'll find her there. But she has such passion in wanting to inspire and help others, and that in and of itself brings hope and optimism to other authors. So think about your own way that you approach your writing, even when you look at stuff that you've written before, and maybe you see something you've written before and you're a little bit critical, because if you had written that same piece today, or that same scene, or that piece of dialogue, or whatever it was, you would have done it this way. You would have done it differently because you've learned something. Well, that's okay. It's demonstrating that you've grown as a writer, that you've continued to get better and grow, which is really, really important for our craft. So a shout out and thank you to CJ for that inspiration. I hope you, dear listener, inspiring to reflect upon from this episode, from this conversation. Feel free to share something that you reflected on. You can @ me on Twitter. I'm @MarkLeslie, or you can leave comments for any episode of the podcast over at starkreflections.ca. Well, that's it for this episode. My apologies. My computer system is just sluggish and weird stuff's happening, so I just noticed that the audio that you just heard was a little clippy in some odd spots. So my apologies for that. I am aware of it, but I didn't want to go back and re-record this a third time. So that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to support the podcast, you can become a patron over at patreon.com/reflections. You can leave a review for the podcast over on the podcatcher of your choice. As you author listeners know, reviews are very, very important and helpful to creative spirits. Or you can share this podcast with somebody that you think would find value. So, just a reminder again to listen to, there's a little treat for you after the end credits. It is a song from CJ, singing as Cindy Savage, and it's over at Reverb Nation, and the song you're going to hear is Just No Forgetting You. I love this one. It was kind of snappy and jazzy and fun. So many of her songs I loved, but this one I loved the best. So, that's it for this episode. As I said, thank you again for listening. Until next week and next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.
There's no escaping, there's nowhere to run. I might be concerned, but I am having so much fun. I should forget you, see me walking out the door. You talk to me sweetly, and you know that I want more. You ask me to dinner, you ask me to dance. No resisting that smile, I know I haven't got a chance. No turning back now, there's nowhere left to hide. Those arms wrap around me, and you know that I don't mind. Because when I'm with you, It's so hard to notice there's anyone else around. Can't think clearly and I nearly catch myself starting to smile. One look in those eyes and I realize I can't remember my name. I have to accept the power that's kept me from having self-control. There's just no forgetting you. There's just no forgetting you. Everything's such a rush. I enjoy myself so much when there's just no forgetting you. I have stopped fighting. I have given up. You know those mission papers? Well, last night I ripped them up. There is no winning. I don't mind the cost. Surprised to admit it, but I'm happy that I lost. Because when I'm with you, it's so hard to notice there's anyone else around. Can't think clearly and I nearly catch myself starting to smile. One look in those eyes and I realize I can't remember my name. I have to accept the power that's kept me from having self-control. There's just no forgetting you. There's just no forgetting you. Everything's such a rush. I enjoy myself so much when there's just